this at the moment.
Rachel, could you give me the thumbs up if you see it on YouTube?
Oh, hang on. Sorry, hang on.
And I'm going to start with a few attendees will start to join. If you look at the panelist list, the attendee tab, you'll see.
Yeah.
None at the moment.
Could you give me the thumbs up if you see it on YouTube?
Oh, hang on. Sorry.
YouTube's working.
Okay. There we go.
Are we starting at 7 or 7:15?
7. Is that a nudge, Steve, just to chivvy us along?
No,
Somewhere it says 7.
because it was 7:15. I was going to dash and do something, but I won't now.
When Andy was chairing Town Matters, it was much easier for him to start a little bit late.
Right. Okay.
That was why.
1 year only, mate.
Very good.
So sounds like every Tottenham manager since 1960, mate.
Don't go to that painful area. Right, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes, fine. Thank you very much. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Town Matters meeting of the 4th of August. My name is Nick Dove, and I'm the chair for this evening. Everyone's very welcome, wherever you are, either in person or actually on the end of your computers. We try to make our council and committee meetings available to as many people as possible, regardless of where they are, so virtually and in person. And we also need to make sure those attending meetings here in the council chamber feel as safe as possible, talking obviously about the COVID situation. I'd like to welcome those of you who I haven't seen here before, particularly Tim and Jim who are here. Welcome. And thank you to our guests. I've got Tom and I've got Peter, I think, here who are joining us to present. Before I formally start the meeting, I just need to mention fire regulations. So should fire break out and we hear, this is for the people in this building rather than colleagues on the call, obviously. Should you hear a fire alarm go off, that's the way out. The door's through there. If you push through there, you go downstairs, exit into the car park. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Fine. Thank you very much. It's kind of legal stuff and the sort of regulations out of the way. We are live streaming via our YouTube channel, and Rachel will be tweeting as we go along anything that's worth tweeting. Will all participants, town council staff, etc., please make sure you're muted until I ask you to speak. Please use the electronic blue or yellow hands to ask a question. You'll find that, I think, all of you are on this call from the top of your screen. The votes will be, for councillors in the chamber, can I ask you, Mark, to use your orange card for voting. The votes today will be recorded by Paul. We haven't got a lot of voting to do, but Paul, who is our town clerk. Trying to manage this meeting in terms of, so we have people have the right time to speak and get their points across, and we have time for discussions. But there may well come a point where I'm going to have to cut a subject back, so I will give warning of that if we start to come to that area. I've allocated time for each subject, but it may be we get into a lot of conversations that I need to say, right, we're going to move on, so I'll give you warning about that. We've got a number of attendees who are registered. I think it was 14 who are registered online to get involved. That's brilliant. You're all very welcome. Can I ask you please to pose any questions you have through the Q&A board, and if we can, we'll patch you in so you can speak. And we'll be managing that process and we'll moderate the questions. Those in the room, please raise your hand in the normal way. And so now we move on to the main agenda. So first of all, apologies for absence, declaration of councillors' interest and approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Apologies first, please.
Yeah, we've got apologies from Rich Ackroyd, Ali Barclay, Rob Collett and John Nelson.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Any councillors want to make a declaration of any interest in the subject we're going to be discussing tonight? Okay, that's a no. Thank you very much. And now we move to the approval of the minutes from the last meeting, which was on the 16th of June this year. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to read through and check them for accuracy. Could I have somebody please to propose? Mark, thank you very much indeed. Into second. See Anne, thank you very much. And now to vote. And voting that we're happy with the minutes of the last meeting.
That's unanimous.
Thank you very much indeed. We now come to item 2, which is questions and comments from the public and councillors. If I could start first of all with members of the public, have we got any comments or questions from members of the public here in the chamber? None coming through on
Rachel, noted nothing coming through from the chat board or from panelists.
Anita's got a hand up.
Thanks, Nick. My apologies. I should have declared an interest when we come to item 6 with substantial grants. I am a director of fair housing for Frome, and I think that's one of the proposals being considered.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Anita, for pointing that out. Okay, any comments from fellow councillors who are here? Anyone want to update us on anything that's been going on in the last 6 weeks, or anything to share with the meeting?
Anita, do you have your hand up for this one as well?
Beg your pardon. Sorry.
Okay, and any other questions or comments from any other councillors present on the call? Talking about district or county? Okay, fantastic. In that case, let's move on to item 3, which is an update on Boyle Cross Phase 3, and that is going to be presented by Jane Llewellyn.
Thank you, Nick. I'm just going to give you a quick update or summary of the stakeholders meeting. Then I'm going to hand over to Rachel, who'll talk about the engagement days on the Boyle Cross, and then we'll hand over to Tom from Nicholas Pearson Associates to talk us through the proposed spatial layout for the new planters and seating and the different concept design options. So the stakeholders meeting was well attended and included representatives from local businesses, the civic society, the independent and the farmers market and councillors. We started off by asking the group their thoughts on how the site could be used. We used Jamboard for this exercise, and if Rachel could put up the first slide for me, you'll be able to see the comments that were posted. Okay, maybe the second slide. And after everybody had posted their comments, we then had a discussion, and the key messages that came from that discussion were that any scheme should be flexible, include some seating, include some planting, make the site safer, and ensure that the markets can continue. I then talked through the site constraints, highlighting all the areas that need to be kept clear for vehicular access onto the site, access to all the inspection and maintenance hatches, and how the farmers market currently set up their stalls. We then asked stakeholders for their ideas about how the site could be developed, again using Jamboard, and you can see the ideas posted on the screen there. And then we discussed these ideas, and the key messages that we heard from that were that any solution must be flexible and not inhibit the space. We need to look more closely at how the site is managed and understand how the site will be used. Need to consider trialling something before making it permanent to make sure it works for everyone. And we should also consider fixed parasol points. So that's just a very quick summary of the stakeholders meeting. Obviously, there was more detail in the paper. And now I'm going to hand you over to Rachel, who'll talk you through the engagement days.
Yes, hi everybody. So the engagement days, we chose a Wednesday and a Thursday in order to be on the cross. And the idea was that we took with us some seating options, including just our fold-out bistro tables and chairs, and some lower bench style seating, which could be moved around so that we could try it in different areas on the Royal Cross. And we also took some greenery, quite a lot of lovely small birch trees that the rangers just happened to have in the yard in order to green it up. The idea about all of this stuff is that we could lay it out in different places, but that we could also invite the public to move it around and have a look at where they liked it, how they felt about it, what they felt was useful. And so to that end, it sort of ends up being an experience for those people rather than just a straight yes, no option tick box. So we were lucky with the weather. We had 2 really nice days. The first day we did take a gazebo, which we felt inhibited us a little bit. And we had, like I said, seating and planting. So I'm just going to show you a little film, which will give you a flavour of what we were doing. Just going to pause that there. So as you will see that there were lots of greenery and lots of seats around, and we were asking people how they were using it and whether they enjoyed using it. People who are giving it a thumbs up were saying that feels great. The people who are not were saying maybe that's not quite so comfortable. So we talked to about 65 people over the space of 2 days for a number of sessions, and without shadow of a doubt, everybody felt that more seating and more planting was important. Real important things to note was that actually quite a lot of people commented that minimal additions of greenery made an enormous impact. So there was a real feeling that any greenery that we could add would be really fantastic. But the other thing that came through, and the other conversation that we were having with people, was how did they feel about the market space, and should it still be continued to be used as a market space? Obviously, one of those days, Stuart was actually on the Royal Cross with us, and so that could have sort of gave people a flavour. Also, as it happens, the previous Saturday, the Somerset Farmers Market had been on the space, so people had recent experience of a more full market, so that was quite useful. And generally speaking, the overwhelming feedback, bar 3 people, was that actually the markets were important. It was important to have it at the centre of our town. Alongside talking to people who came up to us, Viv also went around and about to the businesses just to check that they were in line, and generally speaking, that's exactly how they felt. So that was our engagement. I can't say that it is it's an experiential engagement, so lots of people absolutely weren't asked, but it's a snapshot flavour of how people felt on those days.
Thank you, Rachel. If you could move the slides on now, and then we can hand over to Tom.
Thank you, Jane. And hello to everybody I've not met before. Some of you I have met, fortunately. Just a quick introduction. I'm an associate landscape architect with Nicholas Pearson Associates, and we've been working on and off with the town council for a number of years. Firstly, in helping implement phase 1 of the scheme and offering support to phase 2 as well. And we've had a hand in conversations to do with street furniture on the Boyle Cross area for some time. And I'm excited to say that we're getting to a point now where we think there's a solution that seems to have ticked all those boxes that have just been identified through that consultation process and the community engagement process on site. Really useful to hear that. This next set of slides just provides a snapshot really of some of the process that we've gone through, analysing the existing site constraints and making sure that we've fully understand how the site needs to function and maintain those operational requirements throughout, and where space can be left over for both a mixture of temporary street furniture as per the sort of items that were discussed on site and trialled out, as well as opportunities to put in more permanent fixtures that don't compromise the way the site functions. So this first slide is sort of what's left over once we've gone through all those constraints, including the vehicle tracking for the panel vans to access the site, the access requirements for the underground fountain chamber, including the sort of safety margins that are needed for the personnel working inside that chamber. There's obviously the Boyle Cross fountain itself, which we don't want to sort of put any permanent furniture on top of, including the uplighters that are obviously required to light that. We've got the ATM, we've got the key thoroughfares along the building frontages, as well as to the uncontrolled crossing point near the police pull-in bay, the loading bay at this north end of the site. So the areas in the sort of turquoise blue colour here are the areas that, through all that filtering exercise, are areas that essentially remain untouched by all those operational constraints and therefore are sort of ripe for permanent street furniture installations. There's a sort of two colour tone differentiation here just to be aware of. So the lighter hatches, the diagonal hatches on it, just indicate areas where any permanent items need to be a lower level, so maximum of 1 metre height, because of the site visibility displays for pedestrians crossing at the two crossing points from the Boyle Cross area across the main road. It's worth noting the area to the south side where we've got the wall seat at the top end of the space. Whilst it's currently used as a site for one of the larger market stalls during the Frome Independent, it's been noted that that is one sort of market stall that potentially could be omitted from the larger market events. So we've captured that here as a potential area for permanent street furniture as well. Do you want to move on to the next slide? And then just sort of building on to that, really, an expanded area in this darker colour shows areas where we can install furniture of some description, including those areas that we've already identified for permanent potential. But it could also be used for relatively frequent use, but movable furniture as well. So the footprint in the dark blue here is areas that don't impose upon any of the operational requirements for a smaller market event. So we've allowed for sort of a nominal 5 market stalls, which we understand are legally allowed to operate on a daily basis now on the site. So this site works on that scenario and allows temporary furniture to be arranged in any of the areas identified in blue without imposing on the operational requirements for that 5 market stall event. So it's just a slightly expanded, but obviously you still need to get the panel van access in. It's not to say that street furniture can't be put in other locations, but it really needs to be very movable in that instance to allow for it to be cleared out of the way when the market stalls come in. Okay, so the next slide. So this is just a working example of how the site could then start to take shape and form. I've indicated those 5 market stalls on this just to give a bit of context for the space. So on a daily basis, this site could operate in this way quite comfortably. The purple colours are taking forward from those zones of permanent furniture into areas where we could introduce some permanent planters and combinations of some planters and seating, hopefully. And then the sort of pinky colour is areas where there are opportunities for temporary street furniture that is movable for those sort of 10 times a year when the larger events happen on the site. So the concept really here is to try and frame the boil cross itself. We've deliberately placed furniture on top of the existing steps because we've had it, it's been recognised that there's been the occasional trip, fall hazard, and being able to cover over those is an opportunity here to improve the safety as well. And then sort of extending that along the roadside edge allows you to create a more sort of enclosed space around the market cross, so that you've got an attractive back to the space, a perimeter sort of skirt of planting that forms an attractive backdrop to the fountain, but isn't so high that you can't see the fountain from views from elsewhere in the town as well. And then at the wall seats, there's an opportunity, obviously, there's the existing timber top seat in part of that, but there's an area just off there as well, which we can add some additional planting against the existing masonry wall. And then there's sort of a loose zone within the main area of the site where you can fully utilize things like those bistro tables and chairs and that sort of thing that are much more mobile, allow you to create a much more sort of sociable space, one that's full of activity and encourages people to actually spend time and engage with the markets that are here. So that's essentially the concept layout. We've then taken that forward as a sort of a series of options. So that's fine, you can move on to the next one. So obviously when we're talking about temporary planters, I think most people will be aware of the planters that are already on site. They're an Iota Boulevard product, which sort of a nice balance between contemporary and traditional materials. They're not overly showy, but they recess nicely, but do a decent job. But the problem is obviously scaling them up, and yet still getting to a point where they're mobile is always the challenge. But your first option is obviously that skirt around on the steps. You could just extend the number of existing planters there. So almost as an interim or a trial basis, or a cheaper solution is to roll out more of the existing planters, and you can still get that same enclosure and sense of division of the space a little bit, as well as adding to the greenery on the site. But obviously the scale of that is somewhat diminished, and you haven't got the opportunity to integrate seating in those options. So then the second option is sort of the full bespoke design solution, where we would contract a street furniture manufacturer to work to the site levels and the spatial layout to form essentially a prefabricated powder coated steel planter, which could be coloured something like the anthracite grey that's already some of the products on site, or a black or a bronze, a very sort of heritage colour that would be suitable for the site. And that could sit on the steps. You could use a sort of a block infill or a polystyrene packer to sort of support that, with a bespoke steel skirt that just trims the base of that helps just stop the views of that beneath. And those planters would be integrated then with some water and drainage reservoirs to limit the maintenance requirements. And we could locate timber seating on top of those as well, where appropriate. The third option, just on this current frame, it's an iteration of a theme really. So it's potentially a slightly cheaper solution, which involves a sort of steel fabricated framework, either welded or bolted together, that's fitted to the site with adjustable legs. You get the levels to work, and then that's essentially cladded with timber to create a more aesthetically pleasing finish to it. But obviously a timber solution, you've got to appreciate that the lifespan of the timber is reduced, and there would be probably more frequent ongoing maintenance works associated with that timber, just to keep it looking smart. But in this solution, you've obviously got the opportunity then, because you've essentially created a void internally that isn't watertight, but you could drop in some cheaper plastic planters and use that essentially as a housing for a cheaper product that still gives the same visual effect at the end when it's completed. So there's the three solutions to creating that planter curtain around the edge. We want to move on to the next slide. So this is just some example of images of how this could look in practice. Just all randomly selected scenes really. The top left shows the scene in its entirety, including an illustrative example of 5 layouts of the market. And it shows that curtain of planting wrapping around the boil cross on the left-hand side of the image, as well as the new planter that proposed to the wall seats at the top of the site. And then that cluster of seating, mobile flexible seating, just in the space between the boil cross and the market stalls as well. And you can see that from the top right image, the view as you're coming down Cheap Street towards the fountain, the view of the cross itself is unimpeded by that. But you get this degree of screening from the road behind as well. So the impacts of the traffic is slightly reduced. I think the experiences on site are that the traffic can be surprisingly noisy, despite not necessarily being high speeds. It will help with the perception of that degree of separation from the traffic. It may not physically attenuate the noise too much, but it will help create a different mood and character to that space as well. And then the image at the bottom right, I guess, is just showing that concept where it's essentially a standard planter that's the top part of the component, but at the bottom of it, there's a bespoke skirt plinth that just sits in and fills the space just to tidy that up really, but works to the different site levels. And then you can see that here we've got a indication of a timber seat attached to the top of the planter as well. And obviously we can review the extent of that seating, whether that's more individual single seats or longer seats that are more sociably encourage social interaction. The other option, we haven't modelled it in this one, but we have also considered the opportunity to put a break on that northern edge where it at the lower end of the site, where you could separate the planters into two separate bands and have a walkway between them up the steps, the handrail to allow more direct access to the cross. But there's a balance to be played between that degree of enclosure and shelter and how much you want to encourage that access and keep everything open. I think that's it on this slide. And then just some examples, obviously, during the couple of days on site, there were some bistro tables and chairs that were put out. I think one of the key challenges for this site has always been the steepness of the gradients. And it's always a tricky thing to find a seat that people feel A, stable on and don't feel like they're going to topple over, and B, don't end up fighting against the slope and trying to sort of slide yourself back up the seat too much. So whatever options there are taken forward, they need to be both physically stable and a decent low center of gravity, just to make sure that people are comfortable and don't feel like they're fighting against the forces of gravity when they're on the site. That space towards the cross that we identified for this sort of seating arrangements does level out fractionally compared to the rest of the site, so it is the optimum location for that. And this is a selection of products which we think are suitable. The image on the left and shows it's fairly traditional bistro furniture, but it shows that they're very easy to stack as well. One of the options we've got is to add a sort of bolt hook to the backside of some of the planters, so that on a temporary daily basis, if needs be, some of these items could be chained to that out the way securely, but easily brought out again after the event's finished. And then one of the other options is some sort of a much more stable block. So we've got here an example of a timber cube seat, as well as some powder coated steel timber topped cube seats as well. That similar theme really. So they've got a low center of gravity. They're going to feel stable to sit on. The downside of these ones, obviously, they're less easy to just stow away. They don't stack in the same way. So they would realistically have to be taken away from site and stored elsewhere during the larger events, because there isn't room on the site to accommodate those. Yes, I mean, I think at this point we're really open to feedback. We can understand where this line of concept work takes us, what curries favour the most, and which avenues we can pursue in the next steps. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. Thank you very much, Rachel. Thank you very much, Tom. That was a really helpful talk through the site and some of its limitations and some of the options. So there's no decisions on this tonight. This is for discussion. Please, colleagues, guests, anyone has any questions, please come forward. Okay, Scott, please.
Thanks, Nick. Apologies in advance. I have quite a few sort of questions and points to discuss. It's been very quick movement on this in terms of us getting the information and sort of trying to digest it. So apologies if it is. If
Can you speak up a little bit, please?
Yeah, of course. Any better?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Apologies if I'm covering stuff that may have already been talked about previously. Like I say, I was just trying to digest the report that we received this morning and just sort of make some points. The first thing straight away, I just want to say well done and thank you to Rachel and Jane for their 2 sort of courses of consultation that they did. From the information that's come back, I can see that Jane's is definitely more towards the businesses and the markets, whereas Rachel's was more involving the people and the pedestrians walking through town. And I felt that they both had different feels that both could be incorporated into the project. I like the fact that the new possibility is there for different layouts of market stalls and things. I think the space does have to be sort of flexible in a way. However, I felt that that proposal that Tom has just gone through, I felt weighed more heavily towards market and then pedestrians and people using it. Things like, for example, the movable seating. Who would move it? Where would it go? Storage of bistro seating on site. That storage then takes up a bit more space, and also, let's be honest, how long would it stay there? Anything that's movable can eventually, with a big enough lever, be moved by anyone. And as Tom said, the mock-ups there were only indicative, but I did only see sort of one bench there, and I think that we need more permanent seating than temporary seating. Temporary seating is perfect if we're doing like Rachel did, a consultation there where we have staff there, and there's someone there to watch that seating, because then we then also have to take into account, okay, well, what if that chair breaks and someone's on it? Are we then liable for it? It's less likely to break if it's a permanent, stable structure. I wrote a point down about traffic and speed. Because and I think I've gone over this before, we can make this as pretty as we want and to try and encourage people there, but unless we're having a way to enforce that 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, if we're not telling bus drivers to get the back ends of their buses into the bus bays so traffic can go through, then we're just, we've still got traffic there, we've still got the fumes from the buses and the cars, and it's just, some days is not going to be as nice as it could be, and so that's, it's a holistic approach, I think, in terms of that. Bear with me. I've gone through that. I think we've now seen, obviously, in the past, we've seen the plans that Nick and the architects he contacted come forward. We've obviously got the plans now from Tom and Nicholas Pearson, and there's also been some independent designs done by Katie, who I believe is attending tonight. And I think the best solution is bits from each of them, from in my opinion anyway. Things like storage on site, Katie's design looks at storage within there. Nick's looks at more focusing on the people and the businesses that are already there rather than the sort of the market side of things. And the Nicholas Pearson plan looks at the markets and how they can work within that space as well. I think we're so close to getting the right thing, but I don't think it's quite there yet personally. And then the only other thing I had was covered in the thing. So yeah, that's it for me. I think it's almost there, and I think if we can look a bit more at pedestrianisation and making it a nice permanent space for people walking through the space and visiting the space, as well as markets, which I'm a big fan of. Markets, I feel like we should have markets more, and I loved the Somerset Farmers Market that was there. But yeah, that's it. I'll stop rambling.
Thank you very much, Scott. I've now got Paul, Andy, then Max. So Paul, over to you, please.
Thanks, Nick, and thanks, Tom, for the presentation. Yeah, firstly, I'm pleased to see that we've made some sensible progress on this. It does seem like it's going in the right direction. It's taken much more kind of users into account rather than just kind of peppering the space with seating and planters. So I think these proposals look pretty good in many ways. That my one main concern is that I'll raise at this moment is just, and Tom did touch on this a little bit towards the end of his presentation. It's just the idea of kind of blocking permeability across the space by a wall of planters. Personally, I really don't like the idea of having to corral pedestrians through a narrow pathway to get around the planters. So if there can be some gaps in the planters, the purple planters and the movable planters, the fixed ones and the movable ones, then I think definitely we're going in the right direction. I recognise some of Scott's points about the problems with movable seating. Those things probably need to be addressed, but I think there's probably solutions to that. It's about design and thinking around the problems rather than just kind of scrapping the idea. I'm sure there's solutions to that. So yeah, that's it from me for now.
Thank you, Paul. Andy Park.
Thanks, Nick. So for me, and please excuse my non-technical vocabulary, the one thing that I remember from obviously the 2 days, and before I start, sorry, thank you again, Rachel, Jane. I believe Kate was also at the Cross as well for those 2 days. That was fantastic. And thanks, Tom, for the work you've done on this. I remember from the days that we were on the Cross, we had the low benches on the bank side as well. And for me, where you've got the diagram where we've got the 5 market stalls and you've got the 3 that are going down parallel to the bank, I kind of understood that we were going to look to have low-level fixed benches on that side as well, that market stalls could actually be placed above. I think I spoke to Rachel about this at the time. I think I may have suggested some sort of either concrete bench that was low enough for a stall to go on top of, or even at that point, you could have a bench there that could act as storage as well. But for me, that's a space that could be used for seating that could have market stalls on top of. So whilst the current designs are kind of getting there, and I think we are close, as Scott and Paul have both agreed, I think that's a glaring area that I think we could add extra permanent seating that could also be covered up with market stalls at the right time.
Thank you, Andy. Max.
Thanks. Trouble with putting your hand up slowly is everybody's usually said what you want to say. But the first thing I want to say is a big thanks to everybody. It's the work that's gone into this has been incredible. And I suppose what I would have liked to have seen is a picture of, when you showed us the picture of the 4 pictures, and there was the top left one of where the seats would go, and it showed the markets up there as well. I'd like to have seen a picture without the market stalls there, because whilst I can see the view from one end is quite attractive with lots of planters and it looks quite nice, I still worry that when there's nothing there and we've just got this scheme, there's still going to be a big slab of concrete in the middle. And so really, all I'm saying in a roundabout way is I agree with what Andy and Scott and others have said, that we did have this idea of seating that could go under market stalls, or that, I don't know, maybe you can even roll or whatever. The seating, the bistro chairs are lovely, but very nickable. And I think, as you say, we're getting there. I also do agree that we need to be looking at what it's like on off days, not just on days when there's an event. And that's not just markets, it's any event, you know, when there's not an event there, i.e. an off day, what is that like? What is that space like for people? And I don't want it to be just a big empty slab with things at either end. I still hope that we can move towards there being something there by, as others have said, putting together bits of designs that we've already seen. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. I've got Rachel, then back to Scott and Paul.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that when we were moving things around the market, what we weren't paying too much attention to was the swept path and so I just hope that I wasn't misleading with where we'd put the benches. So although I sort of plonked them in various places, and we tried to get them in places where we tried to get them in places where they weren't used. I just in terms of the actual precise placement, it is best to go with the plan rather than where we'd plonked them on the day and they'd been moved around. I just sort of wanted to make that point.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Scott.
Yeah, sorry, I completely forgot. I had one more point which to do with cost, which is also going to play a part in this. I think the original budget for the project had been set at around, I want to say sort of 25,000. Mine might be wrong, and I think through tweaking of the plans, it had gotten down to around about 15,000. And I don't want to be sort of a negative person. Obviously, looking back at the cost of the project as a whole so far, and then the overspend that we had, completely not our fault, just bad timing, bad circumstances. I think we do have to, as we go through this process, we still have to keep cost in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Paul.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, a couple of things, and I just noticed that there's another comment. I just noticed that Kate Bilby's comment that this is the market. The area is Pennant stone, not concrete. So people keep talking about a big expanse of concrete, and it isn't concrete. It's actually quite a nice stone. Anyway, the other point I wanted to make, was that I think we've got a bit kind of obsessed with the space being used for markets and not other things. Maxine did make the point that there other events could take place in that space, and I think it's absolutely critical that we don't put things in that space which prevent us animating the space in some other way by having interesting events. I think the important thing is that there, as many people have said, I'm sure other people have made the same point, we need to animate that space, use that space in a really creative way. And if we put all sorts of fixed street furniture there, which limits what we can do, then we'll be shooting ourselves in the foot, perhaps is the right expression. I don't know. But anyway, just that point.
Thank you. Andy?
Sorry, yeah, thanks, Nick. I just wanted to come back. When I looked at the swept pathway diagram, it's my understanding that at least on the bank side, that's not as big an impact. I wasn't talking about on the roadside. So sorry, Rachel.
Thanks, Rachel. Did you want to come back?
There were just a few comments on the Q&A board, so I don't know whether you wanted me to read them. Yeah. Okay. So Matt Welford says, has anyone checked with the market the feasibility placing a market stall over a bench with people who run the markets? Kate Bilby says, here, Paul, keep the space open and flexible. That's what will make it successful. And Matt Welst has come back and said, also hearing councillors' concerns with the space when not being used for markets, but they can also, can they also please consider the economic value of the market and its potential use for other things? And John Clark has also commented, paramount should be the site being accessible for all and not purely market focused.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Mark.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Tom, for the plans you've shown us tonight. I was present on a Thursday afternoon for the consultation with Rachel and Kate, and it was very obvious that people I spoke to, and people wanted to use the space in different ways, and planters and seating was paramount at that time. I'm a little nervous about movable seating, A, because it'll get moved and not come back, and B, it's a very difficult site. It's a very slopey site with different angles, and if you move things away from, for example, we put some bistro chairs and tables up for people, and if they moved it slightly, then they could topple over. So I think it's probably easier and safer if we can fix most of this in some way. I also, and of course, we'd have to find somewhere to store it as well, and we haven't got a lot of space available in the town. It's also worth remembering that 13 of the 17 councillors sitting before you tonight had no part in the design of what we've got at the moment. It's a very difficult site, and we're trying to improve what we've inherited, really. And so, you know, more power to those who are really pushing this forward. It's got to be the right space, but it has to be for the benefit of all of the people from Frome and visitors who actually use the space. It's very difficult for, and understandable why people have their own interests and want to do it. And it's going to be a very, very difficult compromise to make a suitable space acceptable to all. And not everybody will be satisfied, but we have to do what we can for the majority. And I was very pleased to visit that Saturday market the other week when it was absolutely rammed, or it was a bad day. And that's how it's being used at the moment. We will have to accommodate things like that. I remember markets being there years and years ago, which were very, very busy on a Wednesday. And I'd like to see that come back. So yes, the consultation's going the right way, but we have to have a plan that's going to be benefiting for most of the people in the town.
Thank you very much indeed, Mark. I'm conscious of the time. Jane, you had a comment.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say, you know, it's great to hear all your feedback, and that's exactly
what we wanted to happen this evening. Talking about the sort of movable or flexible furniture, yeah, you know, we've had the same thoughts, but it was something that we asked to be considered as part of any plans, because you know, we feel that could add to the seating on the site. But yes, you know, we will have to think about how, if that's practical, and how it can be managed. I'm still waiting. I have received some comments via email from some of the stakeholders, which will also feed back into our discussions with Tom going forward. I'm yet to hear from the markets, but I'll make sure that obviously we get their feedback, particularly on the question of the bench that was mentioned, and whether or not we can or they can put the stall over it. So lots of questions, lots of good suggestions, and I think Scott mentioned cost. So part of what we can look at, you know, once maybe we've revised the plans again, taking into account comments where we can, then obviously we'll look at costs in more detail going forward. So yes, thank you everybody for your comments. That was really helpful.
Right, Max, I know you've got your hand up, but unless it's very quick, I want to move on. We've taken now best part of an hour talking about this, and I could talk about it for 2 hours, but I won't bore you all with my views on it. So Max, is it something very quick?
I just wanted to say Liz's comments, because Liz is watching and she's got some comments, but I don't have to if you don't want that.
If we can add them in, if Jane can get them, that would be really helpful. Thanks very much.
All right.
Thank you.
I'll leave it then and let it be on email.
Thanks. And Rachel, I see you had your hand up.
Oh, I was just saying there's just one final comment which says the easiest compromise will be to keep things flexible, then program different activities for different groups in the town.
Right, thank you very much indeed. Thank you everyone for taking part in it. Thank you to Jane, thank you to Rachel, and thank you to Tom. I think Tom, we met about 13 months ago when I first started talking to you about this, but I then said, can you get it done in 2 months? And that didn't quite work. So thank you very much everyone for your comments and what you've come up with tonight. That's really helpful. There's no decisions on this, as Jane pointed out tonight. It's just, again, enriching, if you like, the picture and the options we've got. So moving to item number 4. This is a great piece of work I'm looking forward to here. It's Emma, who I haven't actually met yet, Emma, so apologies. But really looking forward to you talking about the work to support active travel. Over to you.
Thank you. is it Rachel? Are you sharing your screen with the PowerPoint? Oh, brilliant! Thank you. Yeah. So when the screen is up, oh, brilliant! Thank you. So yeah, I will give you an update on the work I've been doing to support active travel. There's an overview there of the work programme, which is fairly detailed. I might just jump straight onto the activities, if that's okay, and we can come back to the work programme afterwards if anyone's interested. So the first thing on here is the LCWIP, which we got funding for earlier this year from Somerset County Council's Climate Emergency Community Fund. And work started on that in May. And what it will create, as the title suggests, a local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. But the plan is to design a joined up, safe network of walking and cycling routes around the town. And it also, the projects or the work that it will highlight, it will put into a prioritised list of projects that we can pick out from that plan. And also the Department for Transport cite an LCWIP as criteria to get funding for projects. So we're much more likely to get funding to put these measures in by having an LCWIP. And it also means that as we pick parts out as the funding becomes available, it's all working to a joined up plan rather than putting piecemeal things in that actually may never link up in the future. So that's quite exciting. We won't have the finished plan until early next year, but then from there we can be applying for funding and moving forward with that. We've got some workshops coming up, as you can see on the screen there. So 12th of August, 23rd of September, and then the 10th of November. So anyone is very welcome to come along. The August and the September date is actually exactly the same workshop, just repeated, because we thought August, lots of people are on holiday, we might miss people. So we're doing the same one for the second one. And that one, our transport consultant has set the agenda and she'll be leading that meeting. But it's an inspirational workshop to give people ideas of what a town with walking and cycling routes could look like, asking people what they would like to see in the future, getting some ideas together. There'll be breakout groups as well to discuss things. And then the November date will be when the draft plan is presented and people can feed back on that. So that's our LCWIP, which is happening now. If you want to come to any of those workshops, there's a page on our website where you can sign up with Ticket Tailor. We're doing all of them online because we thought in case any restrictions come into play, then we've already set ourselves up online so we don't have to change anything. So they'll all be on Zoom. Could I have the next slide, please, Rachel? Thank you. So School Street as well. You may remember that School Street was talked about last summer, August and September time, and then the funding was delayed. So that's now been re-announced, and we've been working through a procurement process to find a transport consultant to work with us. So the money has come from the Department for Transport. Sustrans are the transport consultant who was successful in getting the work, which is brilliant. They're very experienced with working with school streets and working with communities and various other walking and cycling projects that they've been involved with. And they're going to be taking the lead with all of the engagement. And this year, the funding that we've got enables us to spend much more time on engagement this time round. So in September, there will be an online and an in-person session to explore the area, look at the issues, look at any opportunities, just gather feedback from people about the area to learn about what people feel about the space. And then in October, there's going to be co-design workshops, which will be the first week in October. We're still confirming locations, but again, they will be in person. 3 of them will be near the schools in the area, which is Critchell School, Trinity School, Oakfield Academy, and then also Avanti Park further down as well. And then we're also hoping to have one of those co-design sessions in town alongside the Saturday market as well. Like I said, that's all to be confirmed. We're still working out, still getting permission to be in each of those spaces. But it means that we've got September and October to start the conversation, to invite people to co-design with us or with Sustrans, and then Sustrans will be working through the designs in November and December. So there's a much longer time scale this time, and then the final designs will be ready early next year. So that's where we are at the moment with School Street. There'll be much more press coming out soon and leaflets and information about that, but it's fairly new. We've only just appointed Sustrans, so we're very quickly trying to get dates in the diary, and we've got a very hectic calendar of events anyway, so we're working these things out at the moment. Can I have the next slide, please, Rachel? Thank you. So here I've just grouped together some of the cycling things that are happening. Well, the School Active Travel Challenge, the first one that is actually active travel, that's all sorts. But so the School Active Travel Challenge, we've run that every year since 2017, except for 2020, where we had to cancel it because of obvious reasons. But every year that we've run the School Travel Challenge, during the week that it runs for, where we run activities and incentives, and the kids have stamped cards and we have prizes and rewards, all sorts of things to encourage people to travel actively, we found there's been a 20% increase in active journeys during that week. And we've also found that there's been a sustained increase of around 5% increase in active journeys that has sustained throughout the year. So that's really positive, and the kids really love it. It's loads of fun, and it starts that conversation off as well, and it takes that conversation home to parents. And we do understand that for some people they have to drive to school, or kids are driven to school, and they don't necessarily have the power to say don't drive me to school. But we have worked with schools to create a 5-minute walk zone. So we suggest that if people have to come by car, if they're travelling to work afterwards, could they park 5 minutes away and just walk that last bit of the journey? So we work with, it's a flexible approach. So anyone that did a park and stride like that would still count towards the statistics and the rewards and all sorts of things. What's exciting this year, I've put Mode Shift Stars on there, which is a national reward scheme which Somerset County Council have bought a licence for, and we're hoping to roll that out in schools together next year. And that's it will be a really good platform for encouraging schools to keep going throughout the year, rather than just having this one push once a year, because it supports schools to write a travel plan, and it gives a set of criteria so they can work towards bronze, silver and gold rewards. So that'll be a new thing that I'll be talking to schools about from September. And yeah, the School Travel Challenge this year will be September 21, which will also be the same week as the Great Big Green Week. So a really nice link there. So the next thing on that slide is Cycle Together, which is a new scheme from some lottery funding that we got last year. And the lottery funding has funded a number of projects under the Green and Healthy Futures programme, which has been run in partnership with Frome Medical Practice, Adventure Frome and Frome Town Council. And the Cycle Together scheme, which is the one that I'm running, is a scheme where participants are loaned an e-bike for 4 weeks, and they also get up to 6 hours of cycle confidence classes as well for those 4 weeks while they've got the bike. They've also got all the accessories that they need. So there's panniers, lights, a lock, a high-vis jacket, everything to be able to just go and see, experience living with a bike, and see if maybe some of the journeys that they make in their day-to-day lives could be made by bike instead of by car, maybe just to get some extra exercise and to use it for leisure in the evenings, whenever it might be. So it's a really good opportunity for people to explore traveling by bike, and also using an e-bike. There are people on the scheme who've already got a bike but are looking to get an e-bike, and then it's a good way to test the waters before investing in an e-bike. But they are brilliant for Frome because the hills are huge, as a lot of you will know. And at the moment, we've got 6 bikes, so 6 people per month can borrow a bike. I only started it in May, so we've only had May, June and July so far, and then the August group are going out in a couple of weeks. There's an online sign-up form, and it's quite full at the moment. So so I need to review that at some point and see if there's a way of getting people through more quickly, maybe get more people, enable more people to have a go, because it's a great scheme. And also there's a survey at the beginning before they take the bikes out, a survey at the end, so that we can then monitor what difference it is making, if it's changed any journeys, if people are feeling better in themselves generally because of that, if there's anything that we can improve. The lottery funding also has paid for an evaluator, so we've got a new person in post who's taken all that data, and she's been working with the University of Plymouth on putting the survey together and looking at the data. So there'll be a really good, robust bit of evidence and data from that. So also the bike Jumble is on there. That's something that we do every year as well. So that started in 2018. So we've had 4 Jumbles so far. The first couple of years, we just put a call out and said, donate anything bike related. And mostly we get whole bikes donated, but we take everything. So we also get parts, accessories, bits of bikes, clothing, whatever might be bike related. And the first couple of years, we only had about 30 odd bikes donated. And then in 2020, last September, we had 120. And then this year we had 90. So it's suddenly ramped up. And all of the money raised from selling those bikes goes to Frome's Missing Links. So this year we raised £3,000. Last September, we raised £3,700. So it's great for raising awareness about Frome's Missing Links, who are a local charity trying to link up walking and cycling routes around Frome. It's also great to enable people to get a bike, because a lot of the bikes, we check over them as much as we can, but we don't have a lot of time and we don't have a location to be really thorough. So a lot of them, some of the bikes are sold ready to go, some of them need a bit of work. And so because of that, they're fairly cheap. So it means that most people could turn up and find a bike that they could afford, or a bike that they might want to take away as a project to learn some bike maintenance skills. It also saves a huge amount of landfill waste, because a lot of bikes, when people donate them, they'll say, this has been sat in my shed or sat in my garden for 10 years, sometimes 20 years. And so for some people, they would have been getting rid of it at some point, but because the Jumble comes up and we take all the donations, anything that's donated to us, so it saves bikes from landfill. It enables people to access a bike, and then hope some people have them as projects, like I say, and it raises awareness of Frome's Missing Links, which is a really important thing in Frome as well. And then just quickly on that slide, we've also got a couple of e-bikes that are just hire bikes as like a normal kind of hire scheme. So we've had those for about 5 years, and they can just be rented online, half day or full day. They're really, really cheap. They're e-bikes, which are normally £40 plus for a day rental for a normal hire business, but we rent them for £6 for half a day or £12 for a full day. So they're an absolute bargain. So another way to explore an e-bike, or to just swap a car journey for borrowing a bike and having a go on that. At the moment, one of the bikes is broken, so if you go online to try and hire it, you'll find there's only one at the moment, but we're looking to replace that one soon. Rachel, could I have the next slide, please? So a few other bits I'm working on here. So Walkers Are Welcome, that's a national award scheme, a national accreditation that towns can apply to. And we got Walkers Are Welcome status in 2018. And as part of getting that, we have to show that we're maintaining and improving footpaths and facilities. We have to kind of reapply every year. So every year we've been successful in maintaining that accreditation. There's a team of people, and we meet regularly and like get on board with anything that might need improving and talk about setting up new routes. The group have created a few new routes. One of them is a walk from Frome to Bath, the Saxon Kingsway, which is a great extra route to have. And then there's various other ones, and we've got maps and we've got a website with the walks on. It's also about networking, and this year one of the members of the Frome Walkers Welcome group has been working with the Mendip area of outstanding natural beauty, and also with some of the towns along the way. So Wells and Shepton Mallet are looking to become a Walkers Welcome town. So we've been helping them, sharing our experience of becoming a Walkers Welcome town in Frome. But also there's this ongoing conversation with the Mendip Way that we can promote this walk and promote the towns along the way. So Cheddar also are already a Walkers Welcome town. So we've got this link that's just started this year, but there's a really exciting conversation and plan forming there. And also the Walkers Welcome group organised the Frome Walking Festival with Frome Town Council as well. So that's another positive to come out of being a Walkers Welcome town. So also on their Clean Air Frome, Frome Tech Shed have created air sensors and a Clean Air Frome website. And that was with support from Frome Town Council initially. And they're also going to be at Great Big Green Week running a workshop to enable people to make their own air sensors for the streets. So this is something that could work really nicely alongside some of the other active travel work. If we can get streets interested in the air quality in their area, or referring people to the website to check results. I know this is something that's kind of relatively new in a way, and it's something that's got potential to be a really good link to all of the active travel projects as we go forwards. The Co-Wheels Car Club as well. We've got two Co-Wheels cars in Frome, one at Frome Town Hall and one that's now at Alexandra Road. That one used to be at the Cheese and Grain, but it wasn't being used very much, and it also got vandalised a few times, so that's been moved. The Co-Wheels Car Club is, you sign up as a member and then you can hire a car literally by the hour, and you can do it all on your phone or on a laptop, so you can find where the car is, you book out your time, and you have a little credit card as your membership that gets you into the car. So it's great for shorter journeys, and a great way of having access to a car if you don't use a car regularly. The one on Alexandra Road has only just been put there, so we're going to see how that goes. They've done it this time as a zone, so if anyone's already familiar with the car club, you may have seen in the past they have a bay painted on the road, but this time they're doing it as a zone. So if you hire the car, you'll get a notification just 10 minutes before you pick it up to say exactly where it's parked on that road. But the benefit of it being in a zone is that if it isn't working there for any reason, they can just move it to a different location overnight, and it's easy to do. Whereas if it's a painted on bay, then it's a little bit more difficult to be so flexible. I think it would be great to have lots of car clubs around in Frome, because it's, like I said, it's a great way to have access to a car if you don't need one very often. And I think with lockdown, so many people haven't been driving quite so much, so maybe are considering not having the second car, and maybe this could be a good replacement. But Co-Wheels, they need to see a certain level of use before they can introduce the new car. So if the two cars, Frome Town Hall is being used quite regularly, Alexandra Road, like I say, is new. But if we find that they are well used, then there could be scope to ask if we can have more cars in Frome. So yeah, that will be exciting. And then, yeah, Frome Station Friends, that's a group that was formed before COVID, early 2020. There was a team of people really interested in maintaining and developing and improving the train station. And then, of course, we went into lockdown. And so during lockdown, Steve Tanner, Frome Town Council councillor, did a brilliant job of contacting Network Rail regularly throughout lockdown, because we needed permission from Network Rail to be able to access the disused side of the train station, the disused platform. We've now got the permission, so now we're trying to get the group back up and running after quite a long gap, and hopefully do some really good things on the other side, because at the moment it's not been accessed for so long. It's quite grubby, and it could be an amazing space and a great welcome for people visiting Frome, and also a great way to highlight. We do have a train station, we have trains to places all around, you know, so it's a good way to highlight that we have that facility. Thanks, Rachel. Could I have the next slide? So the last couple of things that on here are just a bit of the communication that I do in my role. So the climate emergency transport meetings, those are monthly meetings that I have, that I hold with representatives from Frome Town Council, Amended District Council, Sustainable Frome, Bespoke, which is the Frome and Villages bus user group, Frome's Missing Links, and Frome Station Friends. And yeah, that's updates and sharing news and working on actions together. So yeah, so that's a really good check-in to share what everyone else is up to and to get news out through other people's channels as well. Yeah, and the active travel newsletter, that's a relatively new thing. There's a MailChimp link around, and I'm using that to update people on active travel news, and if there's any way that people can get involved with any of the projects that are happening in Frome. I've regularly had emails from people randomly who are asking very similar things, and I wonder if there's a way that I could use this newsletter to start introducing people or getting ideas out together and seeing what it is that people would like to see happen, and start networking a bit better. So that's where that might go. We shall see. Yeah, that's me. So I guess over to questions if anyone has any.
Right, Emma, thank you very, very much indeed. Thank you for sticking to the allotted time. That's brilliant, and I'm amazed at how much you're doing. I don't know how big your team is, but being ironic, Alex, fantastic. I've got a hand up, I think from Anne, right from the start.
Hi Emma, thanks very much. I've got two things. One is about bike racks, both safe. I think they're called bike lockers for people, particularly in the town centre. It came up only last night on Facebook. Someone who's in a rental property, they can't store their bike indoors because their landlord doesn't like it, and they chained their bike to the church. The church might not like that either, and it got vandalised overnight. So somewhere where people could safely park their bike and secure it. And also I was wondering whether we could do some sort of audit of just normal bike racks around the town. I'm thinking of the ones outside Lidl that are always covered up by either compost or what Lidl are selling or something. So it's all well and good, you cycle to do your shopping, but then you can't secure your bike when you're there because there are bike racks, but they're not available. So some sort of audit of where the bike racks are in town to make people aware of them and find out if they're not being used properly, what can we do about that? That's question one. Question two is about public train transport. And again, came up today talking to someone who said the problem of commuting to Frome from Bristol on the train, you either have to get a 5 o'clock train or an 8 o'clock train. I think that's 5 in the morning, 8 at night. So, you know, the problems of actually using the train to commute. I don't know whether that's in your remit, but there you go. Those are my two questions.
Shall I jump in? Is that okay? Yeah. So on the cycle parking, I do have an audit. A few months, actually no, probably more, probably Christmas time, feels like a few months ago, but more like 8 months ago. Yeah, someone from the Sustrans volunteer rangers went round and did an audit of the cycle parking for me, because it had come up as a suggestion, and he just went off and did it and took photos of everything, which was brilliant. So I do have a log of it, but I haven't been round yet to check what condition they're in. I haven't had time to do that, so I'm not sure from the photos what's wobbly or not. But what I found, like, yeah, like the little ones, things that get blocked up, but also a lot of the cycle marking were things that people call wheel benders, where they're just like the little butterfly racks that you put your front wheel on, which are just not suitable. You know, they bend your spokes, the rest of the bike can wobble around. You know, you can't lock the frame as well as the wheel, which means that someone can take the, you know, detach the wheel and then run off with the frame, and all you've got is your wheel. So it's something to revisit and do something about it, and also, like you say, to let people know that they exist. But from the transport, the climate emergency transport meeting, someone in those groups is really interested in having like an active travel map, and he's going to take that on as a volunteer to investigate. And we can't do anything with it till January, at least, because the budget is set and the workload is as it is. But he's really keen to work on that. So that could be something with the cycle parking, like to let people know. And the other thing, yeah, where you said about the cover, I saw the Facebook with the bikes. They emailed me directly as well, because they'd been in touch before about, can we have more parking in that that area. But a couple of different people, again, this is where I've had 2 different people contact me completely independently about a bike hanger. You can get these ones where you, like a street would come together and you kind of pay a rental, and then you have a key and you can completely lock it up. I mean, it's not something that I'm able to do at the moment and look at, but I think if there's a group of people who are interested in coming together and seeing how that could happen, there's nothing like that in Frome at the moment. So maybe that's something that they could take to someone and say, you know, take to a manufacturer and say, could you sponsor this and trial it or something? I don't know. I'm like I said, I can't actually do that at the moment, but I think, yeah, I think there's a few people talking about these same kinds of things that that's where I think the newsletter could be a good way to try and group people or invite people into this. The train thing, very quickly. Yes, that's a huge thing, isn't it? I think as the Frome Station Friends group gets going, maybe they'll have some ability to look into that. At the moment, it's not something I'd be able to do at the moment. I'm supporting the group to get started alongside Steve, but the timetables and the trains is too big for me at the moment. That sounds awful, doesn't it? But I'm hoping.
Emma, it doesn't. Having listened to what you're doing, it doesn't at all. Steve's posted something on the chat about that, so thank you very much. I'm sorry to cut you short, but we have 2 other things.
Sorry, yeah.
No, don't, sorry. It's lovely to hear your enthusiasm. It's fantastic. Paul, you've got your hand up. If you could, if it's quick, please, because we've got something.
Yeah. I was just going to just to kind of back up what Anne was saying about cycle parking. The cycle parking provision in Frome is pretty abysmal and does need improving, including at the town hall, I have to say. Although the bike racks at the town hall are quite good. Just something. One quick thing that did occur to me, thinking about Frome Station at the same time, maybe we could have set up a group called Friends of Cycle Parking in Frome or something like that. It's a group of people that monitor the state of cycle parking around the town and feed into some sort of central database or something.
Great acronym, FOCPIN. Definitely how you say that. Thanks very much indeed, Paul. Thank you. Again, Emma, thank you so much. I've learned an awful lot. It's been really insightful. Now, recently moving into agenda item 5. Peter Wheelhouse is going to introduce this, and as I understand it, we've got Peter Travis in the chamber, possibly Lee somewhere in France, who is going to join us for this. Brilliant, thank you so much. Mindful of the time, please, but really interesting work that's going on, and the bus programme fits nicely with what we've just been talking about. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Peter Wheelhouse. I'm the Deputy Town Clerk and also the Economic Development and Regeneration Manager. If we haven't already done so, could we make Lee Fletcher a panelist, please?
I'm here.
Lee, welcome to you. Thank you very much for coming and joining us from afar. I wondered if we could bring up the Bus Back Better slides, please. Okay, and if we could just run the show. Okay, will that run that show?
Peter, is it
Not to worry if it won't run as a normal slideshow. I'm sure you can all see the slides, so we'll run through it as it is.
Sorry, can you not see? Hang on one second, let me come out again. I thought you were seeing it as a slideshow.
Okay. Yes, I can see that now. Thank you. So I'm going to speak very briefly and then hand over to our local bus guru, Peter Travis of Fabbug. Lee Fletcher will follow Peter and talk about proposals for an e-bus service between Westbury and Frome. And then I'm going to finish by setting out some recommended next steps. So next slide, please. So our work programme commits us to promoting public transport, as you probably just heard. And more recently, we've started to work on a vision for transport in Frome. So it's encouraging to note that in March of this year, the government announced that it will be putting £3 billion into bus service improvements. It has also encouraged transport authorities to form enhanced partnerships with local bus operators and develop bus service improvement plans, which will set out a case for additional funding. And we know that Somerset County Council is committed to both. And this is all against a backdrop, unfortunately, of a 43% decline in per head bus journeys in Somerset over the last 10 years, which is remarkable. But I just think it highlights how important this topic is. Next slide, please. So the question is, what would encourage greater bus usage? And some of the factors are explored in the report, which you'll have all seen, but I have added to the list following consultation with Peter at Fabbug, and they include, very briefly, more evening and weekend services. The government views evening and weekend services in its Bus Back Better campaign as essential. But in Frome, the first operated D2 service to Bath is the only evening service Monday to Saturday, and First are the only company that operates on a Sunday. On frequency, Bus Back Better suggests a 15-minute frequency in towns and hourly frequency on rural routes, and that's not being achieved in this area. On reliability, drivers complain about the incessant roadworks in this area. Now, one measure could be giving buses priority at traffic lights in those circumstances. Greater convenience is a big factor. Now, that means enabling people to get to their place of work, leisure, shopping destinations, and medical facilities at times that they wish to travel. And here on this slide, I've shown Commerce Park, which is currently, unfortunately, devoid of any bus services, but has become a major employer in Frome and is due to become even bigger. In addition, Frome Hospital, Asda and Frome Railway Station are not well served by buses. Fares have risen disproportionately quickly, so extra value or discounted fares should be explored with bus operators, maybe a Frome flat fare, and combined bus rail tickets as examples would be attractive to passengers. And better information will enable people to make better choices. In the report, I highlighted the opportunity to install real-time information in the marketplace, which would make a difference. Some bus shelters, unfortunately, are not in good condition and lack seating, and investment in bus infrastructure such as that may create a better incentive to travel by bus. And with so much development in the pipeline and planned in the town, developers, of course, have a role to play in investing in bus services and infrastructure through Section 106 agreements. And finally, whilst this probably needs to be tackled at a national level, discouraging travel by car would be a useful push factor. Next slide, please. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Peter Travis. I think we've probably moved one slide too far. Thank you. So I'll hand over to Peter for his perspective on some projects that are worth backing. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter. I've worked with FABBUG as part of one of the coordinators of FABBUG for 6 or 7 years. And that's because Frome has got major issues with its bus service. It's had an inadequate bus service ever since first decided, because the services weren't being backed by any funding from Somerset, that they, in 2015, were going to pull back on a whole range of bus services emanating out of Frome. And today, First only operates on the D2 list. The whole approach to buses has changed dramatically. For 30 years, it's been deregulation. And as a consequence, we have bus services in Frome, which aren't actually directed to address the transport essentials of Frome, but to try and make as much money as for the bus operators as is possible. And it's not an easy business to be in. And so we've had the routes like the Bath route competed over between 2 major bus operators. We've had the Trowbridge route similarly competed over, and not for the benefit necessarily of passengers, but to try and make some money, because that's the way the bus industry has been run. Well, surprisingly, perhaps, this government has decided to change that. And so at the same time as looking at active travel, same time as looking at the rail industry, the one sector which is getting most attention at the moment from the government is trying to use the bus industry to address the really serious environmental issue of too many people driving in single occupancy cars. And also it's part of their levelling up agenda, because in many parts of Frome, 1/4 of the households have no access at all to a car. So they are entirely dependent on public transport or on active travel if they're going to go anywhere. And of course, if the household has one car, that often means that there are people in the household who have no access, no easy access to cars. So the government's identified buses as an area that they want to see radical change. And no more important is that than in Somerset, as Peter's mentioned, an astronomic fall, catastrophic fall of nearly half over 10 years. And actually over the last 5 years, that fall has been accelerating. And that's because Somerset, when they had their grants cut, decided to target bus funding as one of the main areas to cut back on Somerset's expenditure. And so when we have, as we have done in the last few weeks, started to talk across the county, I'm co-chair of the Somerset Bus Partnership, we're hearing right across Somerset this story of declining bus use, but a real pressure amongst bus users to see a better service and a wish to see buses play their part in persuading people to leave their cars behind and switch to buses. Our neighbouring authority in Bath is looking to see a 200% increase in bus usage over the next decade. So the thinking has changed. We had a 43% decline in Somerset. At least in Bath, they're looking at a 200% increase over a similar sort of period looking forward. So what is the challenge for us? The challenge is that Somerset is being tasked by the government to produce a bus service improvement plan, gets abbreviated to BSIP, And so they have now said to bus user groups like ours and also to local councils, tell us what you want in terms of bus improvements. Tell us what you want in terms of funding allocation. This from a council that has reduced its funding of buses, major change of approach. They're now saying, tell us what you want, and we will then apply to the government for funding. Whether we'll get all the funding we want is debatable. What it does mean is that we should be putting forward our proposals for how we can improve bus services in Frome. And one of them is we need faster bus services to Bath. And so there's a proposal which we're actually already exploring with the First Bus for a D2X, an express service which runs along the A36 straight into Bath. There's this, 10-year story of the Commerce Park, where we've not been able to get funding from Somerset to get a service into this major Commerce Park development in Frome. Now there is the opportunity to try and get some seed cord funding to try and get a bus service into Commerce Park. There's a really interesting project which I've been talking to Frome Town Council about, evening bus services within the town could be a real economic stimulant within Frome. And it's one of the initiatives which we're going to put forward to Somerset to fund an evening service in the same way as you've got evening services funded in many other towns across the country and in of course, places like Bath. Then when we look at some of our interurban services, yes, we do have a pretty good service to Bath, which through the efforts of FabBug, we maintained that evening service to Bath at a time when Somerset refused to back it, and we managed to persuade Baines to support it. Otherwise, there would not be an evening service to Bath. An evening service which our survey showed was 50% of the people on that evening service were going to work in Bath, and another nearly 25% were going to study in Bath. Those people would not have been able to get to their jobs or to those studies without evening services. Now, if you talk to people who live between here and Shepton Mallet or here and Midsummer Norton, they will tell you the same things about their villages, that they're wanting to get into Frome, to work, to enjoy the nightlife, whatever the purpose, to see friends. And in those villages, they don't have an option. There is no evening service. In most of them, there isn't even a Saturday service. So young people, older people, people who haven't got cars are isolated in those villages. And now the government is saying something has to be done about that. So that will be something else that we will be asking for. FabBug has developed a 60-page document, which we're talking to Frome about, outlining all the improvements that we are going to propose to Somerset. That document has to be sent off in the next 7 to 10 days, and Somerset Bus Partnership will be consulting with Somerset to see how they might react to that, and also working on one in Wales. They're doing something similar. And I know across the border, because I know Lee from his work in Wiltshire, that the bus user groups there are similarly working with their local transport authority in Wiltshire, and some similar groups are working in the West of England Combined Authority. So there's an awful lot of work suddenly to be done in a very short space of time, but the purpose is to try and get a fit for purpose bus service in Frome and serving Frome to its neighbouring towns. And at the moment, I think many people would say that the service isn't really fit for purpose because many people don't get the opportunity to travel to Frome or to travel to neighbouring places because the buses don't run when they need to be run. And that's the change. That's the change that the government policy is looking to fund, to make buses run when people need them, rather than just when bus companies can make a lot of money out of them. So that's what we're doing. And I think Lee is now going to talk about a really interesting development that Peter and I have been working with Leon, who's led on this with Westbury. So do I hand over to Lee at this stage, Peter?
Yeah, yes, please. As it happens, we're a little short of time, unfortunately. But Lee, if you could talk very briefly about
Sure.
the proposed Westbury Frome service, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, to keep it brief then, at present, the Westbury Frome service is only 5 buses each way per day, currently subsidised by Wiltshire Council. Even with the best will in the world, even in the bus back better era, we're going to need something innovative to get it up Wiltshire Council's priority list when they look at services that they want to improve. So what we've basically come up with, sorry, slides are jumping around a little bit. What we basically come up with, at the moment, the services that run on the Westbury Frome corridor come out of the Frome bus depot and essentially feed into the Westbury town bus service. What we propose to do is to create a zero emission bus corridor pilot on the Westbury Frome corridor. So what we would do is to have an electric bus. This on an hourly rotation. We would have an electric bus coming out of the Frome bus depot. It would do a Frome to Westbury run, the service would go up to an hourly frequency. It would then do a circuit of the Westbury town bus route, and then come back and do a Westbury Frome run, and end up back at the Frome bus depot and then charge. We've looked at costings on this. At the moment, the overall service uses a total of two buses to do what it does at the moment, 2 diesel buses. What we're proposing to do is to go with 4 electric buses, 3 of them in operation at any one time, and 1 as a spare. The total cost of that, total capital cost of that would be around 1.5 million. And that would be for the buses, the charging infrastructure, and for what they call an optimism bias contingency, which people like the Department for Transport would want to see when you put in business plans to them. And the funding for that, we would aim to bid for in the next tranche of what they call zero emission bus regional area funding. So that's that. In terms of running costs and subsidy, you would be looking at around in total, you would be looking at around £200,000 per annum in operating costs. Operating costs being the charging, the maintenance, the driver costs, all those things. And we estimate that the revenue it would bring in, and this would be fare revenue, concessionary bus grant, bus service operator grant, and the COVID-19 support for as long as the government keep providing it, would come to around 120,000 per annum. So it would require an ongoing subsidy, at least to begin with, of around £80,000 per annum. But if you look at what Wiltshire Council were spending on it pre-COVID with the current service, they are actually spending £92,000 per annum on it. So with the lower operating costs of the electric bus, and bearing in mind that you've got one extra operational and a service that's going up from 5 buses a day to hourly, you would still make a saving in the annual subsidy that you would have to pay. So what I'll do, obviously, basically, for the capital cost, as I said, we will go for the next tranche of DFT zero emission bus regional area funding. We think that the bid would really stand out for three main reasons. Firstly, it would be relatively inexpensive in terms of the benefits it would generate. You've got to remember is the first tranche has already been settled, and most of the recipients of the grant will be the metropolitan areas and the bigger shire counties, and they tend to put in multi-million-pound bids. The second reason we think that it would stand out is because virtually none of those bids include a proposal like this. And if the government's eventual aim, which is what they say in Bus Back Better, is for all bus services to be zero emission, at some point they have to test that on a route like Westbury Frome. And this would be the ideal opportunity for them to do it. And thirdly, of course, it's an ideal opportunity, because it's a cross-border route, to test how this sort of scheme would work when you have to have Somerset and Wiltshire work together, Westbury and Frome work together. And it would be an opportunity to test that as well. What I'll briefly do, if you look at the slide that Peter's put up there, what you're actually looking at is the Mellor Orion E bus. It's the world's first fully electric low-floor small bus, and it's been specifically designed for the kind of roads that are found on routes such as the Westbury Town Bus, and for rural interurban routes such as Westbury Frome. It comes in a 23-seat version and is manufactured in the UK. The reason that's important is because to qualify for DFT funding, buses have to be at least 23 seats, have to have at least 23 seats, and they have to be manufactured in the UK. It's fully wheelchair accessible from either the front side doors, which is what the picture shows there, or it can be accessible from the rear as well. It has around 120-mile range on a single charge, and it has both an overnight and a rapid charging facility. And the rapid charging facility is what we would utilise at the end of each hourly rotation when the bus returns to the depot. Each run would be designed to be under half of the full charging capacity, which would keep it well within the time available at depot for recharging. And it would also leave plenty of margin for traffic and other issues that would arise during running. What it would also do is leave room for, because things like at the beginning of the day with the peaks and that, there's various things that both Frome and Westbury passengers have told us they want, aside from the core route. Such as services to industrial estates and to connect with key rail services, which you generally do at the evening peak, the morning peak and the evening peak. The range would be there to fit them into the schedule, basically, as they are required at those times. And I know that Favbug and Somerset Bus Partnership already have a fair idea of operational times for those sort of services, and we've obviously discussed that with them. Yeah.
Lee, sorry, it's Nick. I'm the chair of this meeting. I really love your passion and admire when you're getting involved in this and how much you're doing, and also appreciate your comments.
Yeah, you want me to wrap it up though?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. Basically, what we hope the pilot will lead to, if you look at the Frome bus depot, it's strategically placed. So it operates the kind of services that the town bus services for most of the Wiltshire market towns. So you could expand this pilot out to a large section of Wiltshire relatively quickly, especially when you consider that the south of the county, the bus operators there already have a national scheme that they're putting in place. And obviously for your side of the border, it has potential for the Frome Town bus services and interurban rural routes, some of which Peter has mentioned. And so, yeah, just to wrap up, basically, timeline-wise, it's already been presented to Westbury Town Council, backed by them, and officer time has been secured to help develop the project. We've discussed it with groups like the Somerset Bus Partnership and FavBug, and they've been very helpful in helping us develop it, and they're on board as well. On the 14th of July, we presented it to your officer, Nikki Brain, and tonight we're presenting it to you, hopefully for your approval going forward. The next step would be, if you approve it, we'll work up a formal business plan presentation and take that to Wiltshire and Somerset councils. Wiltshire, as the funding authority, would be the one to put in any bid to the Department for Transport. And that's basically it for me.
Thank you very much, Lee. Sorry,
Thanks, Lee. There's just one more slide now, which is the next one, please, Sarah. So effectively, what I'm presenting here are some amended recommendations. So it's to continue to work with FavBug and colleagues in Westbury to lobby for improvements, delegate to me to submit the report that you've already seen, but with some amendments that we've referred to in this presentation, and to endorse FavBug's submission that you heard about earlier. So over to questions. Thank you.
Okay, mindful of the time, I think, Anne, your hand is still raised from earlier on. Scott, if you could be brief, please, because we have another item on the agenda.
Yeah, I will be very, very quick. Love the idea, love the plan. As many councillors and some staff know, one of the first things I talked about was the idea of getting an electronic bus that would do a loop around the town, bringing people into the town. And if we could make the town centre the only bus that goes through there, an electric bus, that would be fantastic. It was something that happened in my hometown, at Birkenhead, back in 2000. So here we are 21 years later, and it's shocking to me that this isn't everywhere already. So yes, it has my support. And if we can get the ball rolling on a town-based looping service that is either free or very cheap, or a cheap pass that would allow people to get into the town, then yes, I'm putting my flag in the ground now. I would definitely go for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott. Rachel, very briefly, please.
Thanks. John Clark's just made a comment that says, let's have bus shelter with solar panels and linked to charging points.
Thank you, John. Andy?
Sorry, was that me, Nick?
Yes, it was, please.
Sorry. Yeah, 2 quick points. Absolutely, without a doubt, in favour of the electric bus, the Westbury service. Be great to link Commerce Park. Great to have a service that goes directly to Westbury train station, connectivity to London, etc., etc. And the other thing, is a frequent D2 bus user, nothing gets my goat more than the fact that you can't tell from looking at the timetable whether or not it goes one way up through Froomfield or it goes through town and then goes back up Clink Road, etc., etc. That's got to be sorted, because there's been times I've tried to get on the bus and they said we're not going that way. So massive frustration. I'm sure it's shared by many others.
Thank you, Andy. And what was your hand up for a question? No, it wasn't. Okay, still up there. Okay. Peter, I know you've got sorry, Peter Wheelhouse, you've got a recommendation to put up. Thank you very much indeed, Lee, for joining us from France. Peter Travis, for your input today. You may be amazed to know that I was old enough to be in London when Ken Livingstone was the mayor. He actually transformed the London bus system by 10p a ride and then 0p a ride, and it just transformed London's bus services overnight. Right, Peter, thank you very much, Peter Wheelhouse. So this is the recommendation that the report is approved as Frome Town Council's consultation response on bus back better.
Yes, Nick, I mean, that certainly was the original recommendation that was in the report as part of the agenda. I'm suggesting actually that that's amended to encompass these 3 points here with councillors' agreement.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. I think everyone can see that on the screen. So 3 points: continue to work with FabBug and colleagues at Westminster to lobby for improvements. Delegate to Deputy Town Clerk, that's Peter, to submit report as Froom's response to Bus Back Better with amendments referred to in this presentation, and endorse FabBug's submission. Are colleagues happy we take that all as one? Can I have a proposer, please? That'll be Mark, thank you very much. Seconder? Anyone? That'll be Andy, thank you very much. Paul, sorry, Paul. And could you all please vote? That's unanimous, great. Thank you again to all of you for presenting. Sorry, I'm still rushed. We've got a falling chair tonight. I should have kept a better eye on it. Okay, we're on to item 6, agenda item 6. This is for ratification of substantial grants. This is Anne Hills and Laura Flaherty.
Thank you. It is merely for ratification. So this has come out of our process. We're beginning to open up our grant giving process, trying to make it as accessible as possible. So recently we had applicants at our grant decision meeting, and the next step is to invite members of the public to come and help us be on the panel when we decide grants, and that we're going to extend out next time, so extend an invitation to members of the public. So these grants have all been decided. They've been decided by the clerk, and all we need to do as councillors now is, I suppose, record that fact by ratifying them at this meeting. I'm assuming you've all read the report, but I can take any questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you very much, Anne. Thanks for the brevity. Steve, I see you've got your hand up, but you declared an interest at some point on this?
Sorry, Nick. Sorry, everybody. I should have declared an interest in the start. I do work for Fair Housing for Froome.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. Thanks, Steve. Thanks again, Anne. So the recommendations, there are 3 of them. Ratify the awards for substantial grants in table 1. Delegate authority to community development management to ensure the recommended conditions are met and review the impacts of this funding as appropriate. And ratify the mayor's grant award details above. Again, are you happy that we take that all as one matter to vote on? Thank you very much. Could I have a proposer, please, other than Mark? That will be Anne then, thank you. And a seconder, Scott, thank you very much. If everyone could please vote. That's unanimous. Okay. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. Apologies if parts of it have felt a bit rushed. My fault in that case, but firstly, absolutely fascinating evening. Some really, really interesting, hard work been going on in the background. Astonishing how much is done by a small town council. I think that's it from me. The next meeting is going to be in 6th of October. Thank you very much, Paul. 6th of October. Thank you very much, all of you in the room, all of you who've attended online elsewhere, and Lee from France, and anyone else who